Let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. You have to get your people to fight, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
To my perpetual confusion, I saw the thin blue line flag, a symbol of support for law enforcement, more than once, being carried by the terrorists as they ignored our commands and continued to assault us.
We lost the line! All MPD, pull back! All MPD, pull back up to the upper deck!
I knew there'd be violence that day, and in fact I came armed, which I never do, to the Capitol.
I became very emotional and began yelling, how the blank could something like this happen? Is this America?
Go! Bust it down!
I always think of that day as a day that it was not just an attack on a building, it was an attack on our republic. And of course, the searing memories of what happened and these insurrectionists rifling through our desks, the officers who died that day and afterward, the horror of what happened.
It was about 30 minutes there where you kind of wonder if everything's breached, to include they're going to come after me. I had threats on Twitter against me. So yeah, it feels like it was yesterday to an extent. Can't believe it's almost been a year.
You know, we felt the trauma of it at the time, but the trauma only grew over time as we saw the images of how many thousands of people were outside the Capitol and how the insurrectionists were beating and gouging police officers, and how close we came to calamity.
It wasn't a Charlottesville, right, where white supremacists came together to rally. It was a mix of regular old conservative Americans with bona fide extremists.
Fight for Trump! Fight for Trump!
It was that large contingent of sort of normal Americans, right, Trumpophiles, who got caught up in the mob and actually were at the forefront of some of the worst violence. That's what made January 6th really astounding.
The fact that over 700 people have been charged is very significant.
Some charges were brought the very next day. Those efforts remain active and will continue until justice is done.
That is really important to show there's consequences, but this investigation going on in the House is also really important.
As we carry out this solemn and sacred duty entrusted to us, our children will know who stood for truth.
This report can't be for the Democrats and it can't be for the Republicans. It's got to be for the country, to be able to have an overall picture that we can write of not just what happened on the 6th. I think that's almost not that important in comparison to what led up to that. What is the rot in the democracy that led to that, and how's it been since?
There have been major security improvements. First goal, new police chief, new sergeant at arms, completely clean shop, new people in charge after what happened. Secondly, we needed to increase the funding resources for the department. The image that 75% of the officers were in plain clothes. Literally, in some cases, the insurrectionists had brought more gear with them than our own police officers. And then the third piece of it, the fact that the police chief had to get permission, seek permission in the middle of an insurrection while the sergeant at arms were trying to defend their chambers and people were getting shot. He had to try to reach them to call in the National Guard. That is absurdity. So we have now passed a law that makes it easier for the police chief to call in the National Guard and call in the military when necessary to defend our Capitol.
I think that the Capitol is more safe. I think that we have improved security around its perimeter. But I think the degree to which Americans are accepting of political violence has gone up, not down.
That coming together of really bona fide extremist groups with conspiracy theorists and with, regular old MAGA supporters created a movement that didn't exist before that.
They tried to hunt down the Speaker of the House. They built a gallows and chanted about murdering the Vice President. They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods.
Make no mistake, this election was stolen from you, from me, and from the country.
Unlike the people attacking the building that day, the insurrectionists in suits and ties inside the chamber understood it was a big lie, and they were still telling it, and they're still telling it to this day.
I feel like I went to hell and back to protect them and the people in this room. But too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist, or that hell actually wasn't that bad. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
It is really, really difficult when you have members, and I think it's even more pointed in the House, honestly, who voted with the insurrectionists. What I was naive about was it didn't end there, and that literally in the ensuing weeks, the former president would keep declaring he was the victor and that the election was rigged and the big lie, and that people would believe that. They'd believe it online. They would march with him. They would introduce bills across the country, now 49 states, 425 bills, to make it harder to vote, to undermine the results of elections. And so it didn't end there. And what was then bear spray and canisters of bear spray and bayonets turned into bills and more rallies and more lies.
Literally, they want to pass bills in some states, I'm not saying this is going to happen, we'll see, that would kick any kind of contested election to partisan houses and senates in various states. And that's what we should be afraid of. And that's what January 6th actually was most scary about. It was that attack on our democracy.
One of the really, really sad outcomes of this, and this attack on our democracy and questioning the results, is that we have had over 8,000 threats on members of Congress. Over 8,000 threats. That's double what we had just a few years ago.
So many members of Congress are being threatened now. So many local officials are being threatened. We have to stigmatize these calls for violence, which is part of the reason why we voted to censure Paul Gosar. We cannot allow people to be glorifying violence who are in positions of responsibility.
We have to be responsible for how we speak. I think secondarily, again, within the party, you have to be disciplining your own people. Short of that, if you say crazy stuff that's not just crazy, but like inflammatory and, you know, really not in the spirit of the United States of America, then maybe Congress has to take action. But you also end up just making people martyrs, and they can raise a ton of money.
The entire country has gone through a process, at least on the right, of the mainstreaming of ideas that in prior eras, and by prior I don't mean that long ago, 5-6 years ago, would have been considered extreme and are now accepted by millions and millions of people.
I am, for the first time in my life in politics, a little pessimistic, and it's what's kind of fueled me to continue to fight from the country first level, because people just don't, you can put facts in front of them, and many people just don't care. And it's sad to see. You know, I came out in this job assuming that everybody had some version of a red line they wouldn't cross, and I'm not sure that's the case.
It seems that the QAnon base of the Republican Party has taken over the Republican Party. And what seems crazy and outlandish and absurd and dangerous has now become very mainstream. I think the propagation of the big lie by the former president and its adoption by Republican members of Congress and Republican state legislators has made the country more dangerous. And we really need to sound the alarm.
I think we're kind of on ice in terms of democracy because one political party doesn't believe in it anymore, doesn't care what the evidence is that's coming out of the select committee, claims it's all partisan, it's all made up. And so we don't have a consensus about what happened on January 6th and how that's a threat to our democracy. This is now a movement infused with extremism, racism, conspiracy theories, all working together and not shy about it. And that kind of extremism just didn't exist like that in the United States even just a couple of years ago. So that's the threat we face.
We the people! We the people! Let's drag them out!
Drag them out!
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out these other videos from USA Today to stay up to date with all the latest news.